We, the citizens of America, are now joined in a great national effort to rebuild our country and restore its promise for all of our people. Because today, we are not merely transferring power from one administration to another or from one party to another, but we are transferring power from Washington, D.C., and giving it back to you, the people.
Well, greetings and welcome to the We the People Convention News and Opinion radio show and podcast. I am Tom Zawistowski, and if you're watching the podcast, you'll see that we're not in our usual location, as we have taken some time to get away, shall we say, from the fray and do a little thinking, do a little reading, kind of, trying to understand, what's going on in our country and what we can do about it. Those of you who watch the radio show, and welcome to everybody who's listening on one of our 5 stations that carry the show live every Saturday morning in Ohio. Welcome to all of you and everyone who's watching the podcast. We appreciate you being with us, whether you're doing so on our website at wethepeopleconvention.org or on YouTube or on iTunes or on Roku TV or Amazon Fire TV. However you're getting us, we're sure glad that you've decided to join us today. Since we last spoke, a lot's happened. The killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis was just starting when we talked last week, and since then, our world has kind of gone up in flames. And so, we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and we're going to talk a little bit about our whole society and what's going on, because this show is about you and I trying to protect and defend our freedom, our liberty, and our prosperity, and our Constitution. And lots of things that are going on are bringing those things under attack. And we need to understand, what's going on and what we can do about it. And then we need to act. And those of you who get my emails, and if you don't, you can go to wethepeopleconvention.org and just sign up, put your email in right in the front, and you'll get my emails. Or who, watch my podcast or listen to this radio show, that we're not just about talk, we're about action. And this week I asked you to take some action, and in this show I will again ask you to take some action. So we're gonna do what we can to play a role in how our society evolves and what's going on in our culture, because that's what it's about to be an American. That's what we're here for. If you're gonna have government of the people, by the people, and for the people, we the people need to play our role, to do our job, to participate, and that's kind of what's going on right now. Is there's a lot of questions about how we can participate and what others are doing to participate and how that's working out. So let's begin with the something I think is the biggest threat to us, and that is an attack on our nation by Antifa, which is a communist. They say they're anti-fascist. That's what Antifa stands for. But they're not anti-fascist. They are communists, and some of them are anarchists. So communists want to control you. Anarchists want no government whatsoever. And there are elements of both of those in Antifa. But bottom line is they took advantage of the situation of the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis by a police officer to create just instability in all our major urban areas and create violence and destruction, including the murder of police officers and injuring of many citizens and tremendous loss of property. And so when are we going to take that serious, right? If this is really an attack on our nation and on our way of life, actually, then what are you going to do about that? And I was extremely pleased, and I hope you were extremely pleased, to hear President Trump announce that the U.S. is going to designate Antifa as a terrorist organization following these violent protests. And I think that was a big step. It's a step that many of us in the Tea Party were calling for literally right after President Trump was elected president, right when he came into office, because we knew that Black Lives Matters, Antifa, Acorn, all these were communist organizations funded both by leftists here in the United States and by overseas. I mean, if you think Antifa is not getting money from China, then you're just not understanding the dynamics of what's going on, right? I mean, the reality is this whole thing, we've talked about this in previous shows, whether it's, the pandemic, quote unquote, that's crushed our economy, or these riots, this is all about destroying the United States by any means necessary. And they mean it. They mean by any means necessary. They don't care whether you survive. They don't care whether you live. They don't care if your business gets burned down. Their goal is to destroy the United States of America. And so for President Trump to step up and say, we're going to declare this a terrorist organization, that was a very important step for all of us. And we're glad that he took that step. So now I'm going to play a clip from Laura Ingram's show with Laura Logan, who's a really interesting reporter. I really wasn't aware of her, but she has done a lot of reporting overseas in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and places like that. And she's a very interesting reporter. And now she's kind of locked in on Antifa. And I want to make sure that you hear what she has to say about who this is and why they're doing what they're doing and how they're doing it. So listen to this clip.
Well, what they're doing, Laura, is exploiting the existing conditions and exploiting the local residents, exploiting the very justified outpouring of grief and anger. They specialize in masking themselves behind genuine protesters and exploiting these opportunities to agitate and destroy. These are professional antagonizers, right? They've been trained. They have manuals in how to do this with their tactics, their techniques, and their procedures. And if you look at them in the crowd, you can start to pick them out because they're very different to the rest of the protesters. They typically wear black, all dressed in black, not always. They have different levels in the hierarchical structure. But you'll see the ones, especially that are in this subculture of real professional antagonists and instigators. And they wear all in black. They often have equipment on their backs. They'll have gas masks that aren't the typical gas masks. Those are the expensive ones. They'll have SDLR cameras, which cost thousands and thousands of dollars that the average protester doesn't have. They'll have communications equipment, like radios with military-grade antennas. You'll see they have earpieces in their ears. There are repeaters on top of vehicles. And these people come from the outside. Their slogans are about abolishing the police, right? They use sayings like the only good cops are dead cops. So they're not looking to reform the system or fix the system or anything like that. You've got a black police chief in Minnesota, right? You've got many other black officials. They don't want to support those people. Those black people are not on their agenda. It's the people who can be exploited. Because when Minneapolis is burned to the ground in any other city, like Ferguson, they move on. And who's left holding the baby, right? Who's left with the destruction? Who's poorer?
The people,
because their
the citizens.
cities and their businesses have been burned down and destroyed.
Right.
Yes,
Well,
the citizens that they say they care about.
So there you have it, a very clear explanation that these aren't just spontaneous events. And I know, that's a shock to some of you listening to this on the radio and watching the podcast. It's not that those of us have been in the Tea Party and have been fighting these people for 10 years. But the point is, I need you to understand that this is not some reaction to this tragic death of this one black man. And we're going to talk about how that's being distorted in the next segment of the show. But this is a planned attack on our culture. And the reason they want to get rid of the police is because they want to then be able to defeat us. And this is the tactic, right? They're using, you are being subjected to psychological warfare. That's what's really going on here. And it's sophisticated. This is the kind of stuff that our military uses on terrorists and uses in Iraq and Afghanistan. They're doing it to you. And they're using things like CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times and Washington Post are all part of the propaganda machine. And this is what you have to understand. So you can't trust what you're seeing even, because it's being distorted. And an example of that was that there started to come out all these stories that there were random piles of bricks magically appearing at protests while agitators handed out cash to rioters. And there's videos of these piles of bricks and of people giving commands through text messages, through phone messages. Hey, go this way. There's bricks here for you to throw through the windows. That's command and control. There's videos out there, if you look, and they're mostly white people. The guy that runs Black Lives Matter is a white Jewish guy. Okay? This isn't about blacks. This is about communism. This is about destroying your country. And so they're pre-positioning materials. They're training people. They've got, field managers who are organizing and paying people to go do this destruction. So don't believe your eyes. But my question is, well, where's the FBI? Right? Where's Christopher Wray in the FBI? Because these are the people, the FBI, I got news for you. In the Tea Party, they had people at our meetings. They were taping our meetings. They were spying on us. They were infiltrating our protests. They would dress like us and ask questions. We knew what they were doing. So it's just amazing to me that you can have these riots break out in every city in the United States, and it's like we had no idea it was coming. That's just not possible, okay? But the part of the problem is there's too many people. I guess the way I would put it is the amount of people who've bought into this anti-American ideology, that we're a racist, that all the problems of the world are caused by us, that we're an unjust nation, that capitalism is an oppressor, not the best thing that ever happened in the world, but the reason the world is poor, which is just a flat out lie, just like the fact that, they say we're a racist nation. I'm going to prove to you in the next section of this show that that's not true. But they're doing all this, and they've got politicians, and they've got media members, and they've got all these people in the quote unquote Democratic Socialist Party that believe this. And there's people in the federal government, and there's people in law enforcement. I saw a story in The Nation that says FBI spooks cover for Antifa terrorists, absolving them from their role in nationwide riots. And this is in The Nation, which is a lefty magazine. The FBI Washington field office has, quote, no intelligence in indicating Antifa involvement and presence in the violence that occurred on May 31st during the D.C. area protests over the murder of George Floyd, according to an internal FBI situation report obtained exclusively by The Nation, meaning it was leaked. It was leaked, okay? And it says the same day President Donald Trump announced on Twitter that he would designate Antifa a terrorist organization, even though the government has no existing authority to declare a domestic group a terrorist organization, and Antifa is not an organized group. Oh, really? Antifa's not an organized group? Well, then who are those people, paying money to them? Who's putting the bricks out there? Who's transporting them? Who's training them? Right? A new video came out from Project Veritas just today about the training of Antifa people. Right? They have paid provocateurs. But they're not an organized group. Following the president's tweet, Attorney General William Barr said in a statement, the violence instigated and carried out by Antifa and other similar groups in connection with the rioting is domestic terrorism and will be treated accordingly. That's what AG Bill Barr just said. Okay, so there's plenty of proof this is true, but nobody wants to face up to it. And then because there are so many lefties in government who are anti-American, right? Who want to get rid of the police, who want to have open borders, want to just completely destroy our culture. Well, now all these new reforms that we've passed, right? These reforms in criminal justice, where we're letting people out of prison, and then they start letting people out of prison for COVID, right? And a lot of those people are also now rioting in the streets and stealing stuff. Well, in New York City, they passed this law, that basically changes who they can, keep locked up. And over 700 arrests have been reported by New York City in the middle of the anarchist week filled with violence and destruction. Unfortunately, it's all for naught. New York City Police Chief Terrence Monahan told the New York Post earlier this week that the majority of those arrested are immediately released due to New York's new bail reform law. Additionally, most won't even need to post bail. Boy, that'll teach them to obey, right? So you're looting a Macy's store in New York City. You get arrested. You get taken to the police station. They release you immediately, and you don't even have to post bail. Why would you stop? Why wouldn't you just go rejoin your group and loot and burn the next door? Why wouldn't you do that? See, it's about norms and sanctions, folks. That's what we learned in our society and my growing up. It's about, what can you do and what can't you do, right? And there's got to be rules and penalties. Well, we're not penalizing people for the right things, and we're penalizing them for the wrong things. And so when AG Barr made his statement this week, which we were very excited about, because President Trump said they're a terrorist organization, and Barr said that he was going to, treat them as such. When he put out a statement, which is available at wethepeopleconvention.org. If you just go there, you'll see I did a press release on it or an email, and it's posted there. And I said, while we agree with AG Barr's statement below that he made on Sunday, I am asking everyone who reads this to call or write AG Barr and demand that the DOJ and FBI go after the funders of Antifa and BLM. Notice in his statement, he says that they will identify criminal organizers and investigators. And I said, but that is not good enough. There would be no organizers or instigators if there was no money to pay them, right? The problem is that most of the funders of Antifa and BLM are wealthy donors to politicians of both sides, both parties, and left-wing institutions, many of whom have been intimidated into donating money, and many who actually are communist sympathizers who want to destroy America. All of them need to be rooted out and charged under the RICO statutes. Why the RICO statutes? Okay. The RICO Act focuses specifically on racketeering and allows the leaders of syndicates to be tried for the crimes they ordered others to do or assisted them in doing. Closing a perceived loophole that allowed a person who instructed someone else to, for example, murder, to exempt from the trial because they did not actually commit the crime themselves. So many of you older people particularly will know RICO, and you'll think about the war that the FBI and the DOJ waged on the mafia, okay? Because there were all these mafia dons who ran these cities who, just paid other people to kill other people, and they were untouchable because they didn't commit the murders. The RICO Act allowed us to do that. Well, here's the bottom line, and the reason I asked you to call AG Bill Barr, and you can do that at 202-353-1555. That's 202-353-1555, or just go to justice.gov, and under contacts, you can send them an email. I want you to understand that if we could just go after guys like Rob Reiner, who is the guy that was Meathead and All Over the Family, for those of you who are old enough to remember that, who was a big lefty funder of these communist groups that are attacking our society. They have been giving money with impunity your and my entire lives. And a lot of them are intimidated. They don't want to give the money, but they're pressured into doing it because they'll be not able to get jobs in movies and things if they don't go along with the hard left. But if AG Bill Barr would do a Roger Stone, would it take one of these Hollywood celebrities or big New York bankers, these New York liberals who give so much money to the Clinton Foundation and to these other groups like Acorn and Occupy Wall Street and all that, and we put that on TV and they seize their bank accounts, ladies and gentlemen, you would wake up to an America we haven't seen since the 1950s. And those of you saying, oh yeah, you want to go back to when blacks were being discriminated against, all that. No. In the 1950s, 1958, black families, there were more two-parent black families in the United States by percentage than there were whites. There were more black businesses in Cleveland, Ohio than there are today, practically, as a percentage. This was a great time for America because we were all moving in the same direction. Because this narrative that you're being sold, this whole idea that we are a racist country, it's just BS. We're the most tolerant country in the world. All the people who are, use the LGBTQ, XYZ, LMNOP stuff, all the crying about how they're unfairly treated. No, go around the world and see how they're treated. They're treated with dignity and respect here. In Baltimore, where the man died in police custody a few years back and they burned Baltimore to the ground. The police chief in Baltimore was black. The mayor was black. The prosecutor was black. The district attorney for the federal government was black. The president of the United States was black. If we're such a racist nation, how can that be? The answer is it can't be. It's a fraud. It's propaganda that they're trying to push on you. And you've got to be smart enough not to buy the lie and do your research and share things like this show to let other people understand that we are not that country. That is what the communists want our people to believe, so we will destroy ourselves. That's what they want these young people to believe in college, right? Who've come out now to do this destruction. And that's what we've got to stop by educating ourselves. So I was very happy to see at the end of the week here that there was a story that said AG Barr is threatening to release Antifa communications to show which elites and politicians played a role in coordinating these riots. And Donald Trump Jr. urged Barr to release the Antifa communications as soon as possible. I'm asking you to call AG Bill Barr at 202-353-1555 and say, prosecute the people who fund these anti-American groups, and we will destroy the communist left in America, and we will finally be the United States again, and we will finally become able to come together as a people without these provocateurs and antagonists doing all this to separate us with lies. And we're going to talk about the big lie about the police hunting black men and all that in the next segment. We're going to take a break right now. You're listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion podcast and radio broadcast, and I'm Tom Zawistowski.
As Merrick, president of Liberty Camp for Kids in Portage County, Ohio. Liberty Camp for Kids is where students in grades 1 through 6 experience the founding of our nation. This year's camp will be held from July 20th through the 24th from 9 till noon. The cost is $30 per camper. If you're interested in our camp, being a volunteer, or even starting one of your own, go to www.libertycampforkids.com.
Buckeye Firearms Association is Ohio's #1 gun rights organization, protecting the rights of Ohio's 4 million gun owners. And you can get our weekly gun rights newsletter free. Receive breaking news and urgent alerts on gun laws. Stay up to date on self-defense and shooting sports. Discover pro-gun activities and events near you. Get your free gun rights newsletter now at bfanews.org. That's bfanews.org. bfanews.org.
All right, we're back, and we thank our sponsors for their support, and we want to thank all of you who listen to this radio network and who listen to this podcast and who donate to donate to us at wethepeopleconvention.org. It's your donations that make this 5-station radio network work and helps us with the podcast. And as I spoke to you last week, we are under attack. There is a concerted effort to silence what you're listening to right now. I talked last week about the listenership, the listenership of our podcast has been cut in half. I talked to you about how the fact that Google has been blacklisting our website, and while we were at like 16,000 page views per day, we're now down to around 1,000 and fighting for that. I just saw some stats on our emails, and we're now back to the area where 50% of our emails are being blocked. And so, it's a concerted effort. They don't want you to hear the things that we're talking about on this show. And, your donations help us, fight that. And we're going to have to start to pay for more advertising to get the word out about this show. And I'll talk about that probably in the weeks ahead as I'm looking at some ways to promote our show without using social media, because they won't, quite frankly, let us, use social media. That's what's going on. All right. So let's get back to, the guts of the show. And I said that, the whole idea behind the communists propaganda is to make you believe things that are just not true, and to make us be against each other, to pit Americans against Americans with lies. The biggest lie is that we have policemen that are just wantonly racist, killing blacks all over America. Now, I mean, it's sad that we have to go back over this, because back during the days of Ferguson and all that, we talked about this, and the statistical evidence is overwhelming. So I sent out a press release or an email earlier this week that said the toxic narrative about police is wrong. And in that article, they just provided all kinds of statistics that show, geez, it's not what they're telling you it is. And yet you have all these ignorant athletes and quote unquote Hollywood movie stars, right, who are dumb as a box of rocks, talking like this is happening all the time. Tucker Carlson did a fantastic job of giving some statistics that I'm going to play for you right now that you need to write down and then share this segment with those you know. Because in times of chaos, we must make sure that we keep perspective. You need to know the truth. Here's the truth from Tucker Carlson.
One group of pro athletes just announced that, quote, "It seems like every week a new tragedy unfolds before our very eyes where people are being killed by police violence. Each time we tweet, we pray, we mourn, only to repeat the cycle a few days later," end quote. In the words of Ben Crump, who's the lawyer representing George Floyd's family in Minneapolis, what we're witnessing here in America is, quote, genocide. Genocide. If you believed we were seeing genocide, then you might understand the riots now in progress. There's nothing worse than genocide. But is it happening? Is any of this true? We should find out. Facts matter. What exactly are the numbers? We found the numbers, and we're going to go through them with you in some detail tonight because it's worth it. Since 2015, the Washington Post has maintained a comprehensive database of fatal police shootings in this country. Last year, the Post logged a total of 1,004 killings. Of the 802 shootings in which the race of the police officer and the suspect was noted, 371 of those killed were white, 236 were black. The vast majority of those killed were not, in fact, unarmed. The vast majority were armed, and African-American suspects were significantly more likely to have a deadly weapon than white suspects. Yet more white suspects were killed. Overall, there were a total of precisely 10 cases in the United States last year, according to the Washington Post, in which unarmed African-Americans were fatally shot by the police. There were 9 men and 1 woman.
So there you have it. 10. 10. That's not genocide. That's not systemic racism. And it's just a lie that it is. Now, clearly, the guy in Minneapolis, the police officer in Minneapolis who murdered that black man, deserves the most serious punishment. I mean, whether they have the death penalty in Minneapolis or Minnesota, I don't know. He's probably going to get life in prison or something like that. He should. But he does not represent the Minneapolis Police Department. He doesn't represent all policemen. The statistics are just overwhelming. And police have been the targets of a poisonous, decades-long campaign to paint law enforcement as a violent cog in the machine of racially oppressive criminal justice system. As more and more serious-minded people embrace this narrative and disregard the astonishing progress made in racial tolerance. So we're believing a lie. And that's leading us into places we just don't want to go. Because we need police. I talked about this last week. You need structure in society. The police deal with the worst part of our society. They deal with the domestic violence, with the murders, with the drug addicts, with the perverts, and with the white collar crime, and with all of this stuff. You need police people. And these people on the left who act as if, that you don't need police. In what world is that? I guess if you're an anarchist, you think you don't need police. You know what you have then? You have people shooting each other like wantonly and randomly. That's what you have. And we don't want that. And here's evidence of that, right? because the other part of this is you see this all on TV and you want to say, yes, that policeman, is really wrong and stuff like that. But these riots are okay because, they have justification. That it is really bad to be black in America. That's just not true. Stop saying that. It's best to be black or brown or Chinese or Native American Indian or whatever you want in America than it is anywhere in the history of the world. Can we get better? Absolutely. Can we do better things? Yes. But quit giving in to them where they want you to admit that you're really a racist and you really have white privilege. That's all BS. We're all human. We all have to work to get through life. But we're not inherently biased. We're inherently competitive. We inherently want an edge for us. Sometimes we're tribal. But all of this is nonsense. But know that you're not alone in thinking that you want law and order, that you want these riots crushed. Because, if you listen to the mainstream media, these riots are justified. And some of these mayors are even talking like, let them burn the city down. They have a right to do that. No, they don't. I have texts on my phone from people who are involved with the Columbus Police Department telling me last Saturday when the riots were going on in Columbus, they were told not to arrest anyone. Do any of you want that kind of a police force or that kind of a mayor? Do you want to own a business in a city where the mayor so disregards your investment and your property and your life that he tells the policeman not to arrest anyone? That's why 58% of the people in a nationwide poll support President Trump when he said he will call in the military if these governors don't get things under control. The Morning Consult conducted a survey from May 31st to June 1st and found that 58% of voters supported using the military to deal with protests and demonstrations across the country alongside the police. Just 30% of respondents said they'd oppose such a measure. Furthermore, 33% of the respondents said they strongly support sending in the military, while an additional 25%, one quarter, said they somewhat supported the move. Only 19% of voters strongly opposed deploying the military. Okay? Interestingly enough, while you would expect 77% of Republicans favored sending in military troops and 52% of independents did, 48% of Democrats did. You know why? Because these riots, like Laura Logan said, in the beginning piece I played for you, these riots are hurting them. None of these riots were in red areas. They're all in Democratic areas. They're all in blue areas. And think about that. Think about how insane that is that you're protesting this racial inequality and this bad justice system and these bad cops, and every one of them is run by black mayors, at least Democrat mayors, not all black mayors, but Democrat mayors, city council, police chiefs, prosecutors. Wait a minute. I thought the Democratic socialists were the ones who were supposed to bring utopia, right? Well, what's wrong with this picture? How are the people that are causing this supposed to fix this, right? So this is where I get confused as we go from dumb to dumber, because now there's this thing called the Defund the Police movement. And basically, there are people out here, including the mayor of Los Angeles, announced he is throwing out plans for a massive police budget hike as support for slashing police department funds grows among activists in the wake of George Floyd's death. As protests continue across the country, some activists are calling to defund police and redirect those funds to other areas such as education and healthcare, arguing police reform is not enough. Black Lives Matter and a coalition of more than 100 other black rights groups, organizations launched an open letter this week calling on citizens to sign a petition to demand local officials decrease funding for police departments and redirect funds to spending on healthcare, education, and community programs. In New York City, more than 40 city council candidates are calling for a $1 billion cut to the NYPD's $6 billion budget over 4 years to help fund other programs such as the city's summer youth employment program. In cities such as Minneapolis, Dallas, Philadelphia, and Nashville, similar movements are gaining traction. Okay, so let's talk about this. Okay. First of all, this idea that we're going to defund the police and use the money for other government programs is completely wrong because it's statism. It's not what our country is about. Our country is about individualism. It's about individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. What you should be talking about is if you want to defund the police, you should cut their budget and refund the money in taxes to people so they can protect themselves, right? So that's the first problem. They keep going towards communism, controlled by the state. And these idiot mayors are going along. And then so the second part of it is, and so from our viewpoint in the Tea Party movement, believe me, we took note during the Obama years when the police who were, watching us protest, right? And when Obama was calling us these terrible radicals, when we never burned any buildings, we never put a piece of trash on the ground. We did things by the book when Barack Obama was cheating by the book, right? But they were getting military vehicles. We had people doing raids during our events. We had them wearing full military garb, using helicopters and all that stuff. And we thought, no. You're supposed to be the police. You're not the military. You are the police. But Barack Obama was going to use the police as his own personal military. So I get that we want to defund some of that nonsense from the police. But the way to do it is to defund the left, like I just talked about in the previous segment. If we would defund the funders of the left, folks, you wouldn't have to worry about that. Because if you weren't constantly poking people and saying, oh, you can't get ahead because of prejudice, those white people hate you, whether you're black or you're straight or you're gay or whatever you are, if you didn't have that, you wouldn't need as much police work. And we saw that. We saw that before the COVID things. What we saw was prosperity and people had jobs. And that took care of a lot of problems. And so that's really the issue that I want you to talk about to people. Now, I have another ask for you before the end of the radio program. I talked about, you have this fax now from Tucker Carlson. You can find it at wethepeopleconvention.org. You know that only 10 blacks in all of the United States were shot by police who were unarmed, and 5 of them were in self-defense because they were attacked. 1 was an accident, and the other ones the police were charged. You've got to tell people about that. That's my ask. You've got to educate your liberal, suburban, white women who think that all this stuff is real because they saw a video and their feelings are blown away, and you got to give them statistics. You got to show them it's not true, that more whites, unarmed whites, are killed by the police than blacks by more than double. You also got to share the fact that 78 police officers were shot and killed and doing their job. And that's way more than the number of blacks that are killed by police officers. So here's the thing I want you to do. We did this in the Tea Party a few years back, and we're going to do it again. I want you to send a pizza to the police department in your area. Make a cake and take it to them. I want you to walk up to every police officer you see and say, thank you for your service. We support you. We know you're not bad. We know you're a good person. We want you to write letters to the editor saying that. And then we're going to try to put together maybe some marches, some protests to support the police. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the police aren't our problem. The communist infiltration of our country is our problem. And the lies about racism in our country are the problem. That's what the problem is. Our problem is that we've let communism sink into our culture, and we've got to irradiate it. We've got to get rid of the cancer. And I hope that AG Bill Barr, by the time I talk to you next week, has arrested the funders and is charging them and making examples of them. And this is all going away. That's the answer. You want to defeat your enemy? Defund them. And so you may want to call AG Bill Barr, as I asked you to do as well. So we're going to wrap up the show for the radio people. Those of you on the podcast and those who are on the radio, the way this works, we're going to sign off on the radio. We're going to continue the podcast for another 30 minutes. Lots of other good stories we're going to talk about. including the COVID stuff, lots of stuff on COVID, and Ron Rosenstein testifying in Congress about Obamagate and all that. So, after the break, you can come back and listen to the podcast and go to wethepeopleconvention.org and you'll hear it there. But we're sure glad that you joined us today. We hope that you've learned some things. We hope that you'll act on the things we ask you to act upon. And we hope you'll join us again next week. And we hope you'll tell others about us. All right. This is the We the People Convention News and Opinion radio show and podcast. And I'm Tom Zawistowski. And we'll see you next week. The We the People Convention News and Opinion radio program is paid for by donors like you. You can donate to the We the People Convention and support our cause by going to wethepeopleconvention.org or by sending your check in any amount to We the People Convention, P.O. Box 6211, Akron, Ohio 44312.
The Buckeye Institute was founded in 1989, and we're the longest-serving free market think tank in the state of Ohio. My goal is removing barriers to prosperity that have been put in place by government. We want for Ohio to be the freest and most prosperous state in the country.
The Buckeye Institute is a source of common sense ideas that will have an impact on the nation as well as the state of Ohio.
All right, we're back for the rest of the podcast. We're glad you stuck with us. We're hoping you're joining us from the radio network. We're awful glad that you've tuned in. There's a great story that came out this week on COVID that I wanted to cover with you right out of the gate, and it's because in Colorado they finally completed one of these survey tests so they could determine how many people had the virus in Colorado. And the antibody testing proves that CDC's remarkably low fatality rate for coronavirus is true. Now that the media is fixated on fanning the flames of racial tensions, watch for them to completely drop all news about the virus. But the evidence against lockdowns continues to mount, whether the media discusses it or not. On May 22nd, I publicized a groundbreaking data from the CDC website suggesting that the bottom line infection fatality rate of COVID-19 is just 26%, even assuming a likely low estimate that 35% of all infections are asymptomatic. What was viewed by the political and scientific experts as hearsay from right-wingers was confirmed by their own gold standard agency. Now we have corroborating evidence from a very large sample size in the state of Colorado. Until now, some have criticized other serology tests as having too small a sample and are perhaps inaccurate, but nearly all of them converged on an infection fatality rate of roughly 0.2%. 0.2%. Now, Colorado has published the results of ongoing antibody tests with massive sample size of 56,000 participants. That's a big sample. The study found as of Thursday that 7.75% of the entire state had been infected. That means that an estimated 489,500 Coloradans already had the virus. If you divide Colorado's 1,135 COVID deaths by the number of infections, you get a death rate of 0.23, almost exactly like the CDC is saying. As it has been the case across the nation, the larger urban counties seem to have a higher prevalence of positive tests. Denver had 11.9%, Arapahoe County, which is where Colorado Springs is 15.9%, and Adams County was 16.2%. Most of the rural counties, with some exceptions, were well below the 7.8 state average. The CDC, for its nationwide projections, assumes a 10.5% infection rate nationwide because most states are more urban than Colorado. So if the CDC is right now at 10.5%, that means there's over 30 million people with the COVID virus in the United States right now. 30 million. Not the 1 million cases they're telling you about or the 2 million cases they're telling you about. 30 million minimum. And if you further divide the Colorado's number by age group, you see that as you're under 60, it just gets lower, as we've talked about. This is why it is utterly insane for the media and politicians to continue to use discovery of more infections as a pretext to continue lockdowns. If anything, it shows that this is more widespread and less deadly than the baseline premise they use to justify the lockdowns. Take a look at these charts showing an inverse relationship between the growth of confirmed cases and the number of hospitalizations and deaths in Colorado. I'm not going to really show you those charts, but let me just say this. When the Colorado data suggests is that we've been seeing everywhere all along. That is, the virus has been around longer than we thought, is more widespread than we thought, is therefore less fatal than we thought, and for all but the most vulnerable people, and that no degree of human intervention seems to work. When the virus is rampaging for these several weeks of peak curve, no lockdown will work to tame it, and when the peak is over, reopening doesn't spike hospitalizations and deaths. Focusing on testing rates at this late stage is therefore ridiculous. Defenders of lockdowns can move the goalposts all they want, but had they been truthful about the death rates from day one, no one would ever have gone along with the lockdowns, even if they could somehow work. The failure of government to be honest about the true likelihood of dying from the virus also caused many people to panic and not get treated from life-threatening diseases. So there you have it, folks. The data is coming in, and yet we have states that are extending the lockdowns. Oh, and social distancing and all this stuff. It's all phony baloney. And you can read that article and you can see those charts on our website at wethepeopleconvention.org. But I just, the problem is it's all propaganda. It's all propaganda. So here's another one that's propaganda. So remember, Trump was for the hydroxychloroquine and the zinc. And the media went nuts because if Trump was for it, it's got to be bad, right? But this is what you need to understand. This is why they're such liars. And I don't use that word. We talked about lying and integrity last week. I don't use that word carelessly. But what you need to understand is this is willful misinformation. This is propaganda. And guess what came out this week? That Lancet study that had everyone dumping hydrochloroquine for COVID-19 looks like it was fake, folks. The big study that the New York Times and everybody said, oh, this is, the hydroxychloroquine doesn't work. Well, there's an interesting article in The Guardian today exposing the small company behind the Lancet published study from late May that claimed people with COVID-19 had some higher risk of death from hydroxychloroquine. It turns out that The Guardian found some very questionable information about the company, leading some to believe that the study is fake. A search of publicly available materials suggests several of this company called Surgisphere employees have little or no data or scientific background. An employee listed as a science editor appears to be a science fiction author and fantasy artist. Another employee listed as a marketing executive is an adult model and events hostess. I'm not making this up. The company's LinkedIn page has fewer than 100 followers and last week listed just 6 employees. While Surgisphere claims to run one of the largest and fastest hospital databases in the world, it has almost no online presence. Until Monday, the Get in Touch link on the Surgisphere homepage redirected to a WordPress template for a cryptocurrency website, raising questions about how hospitals could easily contact the company to join its database. Lancet, the journalist who published the study, and another has now issued an expression of concern about the study. 2 of the world's leading medical journals, The Lancet and the New England Journal of Medicine, published studies based on Surgisphere's data. The studies were co-authored by the firm's chief executive, Sapan Desai. Late on Tuesday, after being approached by The Guardian about this new information, the Lancet released an expression of concern. One of the biggest issues with the study is there has been errors found in the data of the hospitals that the study claimed were participants. They said they never even heard of the company. Okay? We have people who can't get hydroxychloroquine. We have governors and medical hospitals that stopped giving this to people with COVID who need it, and it's been proven it works because of a fake study. Do you see how this is killing people? Do you see how the left's narrative is killing people? And yet you want to believe that Donald Trump's the bad guy? You want to believe that America's the bad guy? This is why we need to be honest about what's going on. Because here's the cost of the COVID. This just came out from the CBO, which is the Congressional Budget Office. The coronavirus pandemic will shrink U.S. economic output by $15.7 trillion over the next decade, or $7.9 trillion after adjusting for inflation, the Congressional Budget Office estimated on Monday. Folks, $7.9 trillion. Because of what? Our stupidity. Because of people who believe in ideology that's false, who believe that police just hunt down black men to kill them because they're all racist. It's just stupid. But it's real pain. And you see the people in these urban areas where they've burned down the stores they go to. You saw the video of the black woman saying, they burned down all the stores I go to. How am I going to live? No one cares about that. No, you're just racist, don't you know it? And this is justified, don't you know it? Because some Hollywood actress who doesn't know crap about what's going on in the urban areas tells you that. And because you think they're a good actress in your favorite Netflix movie, you believe them. Wake up, America. You're all walking around wearing these stupid masks because you don't think for yourself. And this is serious stuff. We are at war with people that are trying to destroy our country and our way of life. And at least you should understand that they're trying to destroy your income, your prosperity. And you don't even recognize it. That's why you watch this show. That's why we talk to you about these things. Because we're about protecting and defending our freedom, liberty, and prosperity. And our Constitution. They're all under attack. All right, I'm going to take a short break. We'll be back. You're listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion radio show and podcast, and I'm Tom Zawistowski.
This is Jordan Seculo with the American Center for Law and Justice. At the ACLJ, we are committed to fighting the deep state and protecting freedom, the right to life, religious liberty, and fighting for the Constitution. The ACLJ has experienced tremendous success in litigating cases at all levels of the judiciary, from the federal district court level to the Supreme Court of the United States. We have offices in Washington, D.C., Jerusalem, and all around the world. You can find out more about the ACLJ and join us by visiting aclj.org.
Did you know that the Right to Life Action Coalition of Ohio is the largest statewide life group in the state? Are you tired of the compromised approach to pro-life legislation that has been the status quo for far too long? Since 2017, the efforts of the Right to Life Action Coalition of Ohio has changed that approach, closing loopholes and making pro-life laws enforceable. Visit rtlaohio.org or call 440-668-4049 for details. The Right to Life Action Coalition of Ohio.
All right, so we're back for our final segment, and I want to talk to you a little bit about, again, the pain that we're going to suffer because we allowed people that we elected to trample our rights and do things they couldn't do, right? And so the unemployment reports came out this week, and while, yes, new unemployment claims rose by 1.9 million, the fact is the coronavirus pandemic has forced roughly 42.6 million workers onto the jobless rolls in just 11 weeks. I asked you last week to take into your own hands responsibility for saving our economy. This last report, here's the bottom line. We're still losing jobs by the millions, right? For over 40 million people out of work. And I guarantee you it's way more than that. At our peak 3 months ago, we had 158 million, I think it was, working people in America. Now you're talking about a third to them and maybe more than that, because there's a lot of people who worked on 1099s and stuff who aren't filing for unemployment because they don't qualify. And there's a lot of people on unemployment who didn't get a check yet. Now, we're trying to open up and we're trying to get these businesses going. As I said to you last week, there is no capitalism without customers. So you've got to get out. You've got to spend the $1,200 the government sent us to stimulate the economy. buy a lawnmower. I don't know, buy plants, go to restaurants, get your hair done. But don't worry about getting sick because I just showed you there's nothing to worry about. Don't believe the lies, but defend your prosperity by getting the businesses up and running as soon as possible and pressuring the politicians to open up everything. Mike DeWine in Ohio keeps lying that we're 100% open. And on our Facebook page and even on their own coronavirus page, there's a list of like 70 types of businesses that aren't open. Why aren't our parks open? You got all these people protesting in the streets, and yet you can't go to a park? It's stupid. Get out of our lives. The emergency is over. You blew it. You screwed it up. Now get out of our way and let us fix it. And so one of the ways we can fix it, and again, kudos to President Trump. He's always under attack, but he's always thinking he's always working for us. The White House is eyeing a bill to bring businesses back from China to distressed areas of the U.S. The measure would offer tax incentives for businesses to move pharmaceutical drugs or device manufacturing to distressed zones in the U.S. and Puerto Rico. It would also provide tax breaks for goods and services purchased by a manufacturer from a provider located within one of these zones. Incentives would be greater for supply lines that move from overseas and for purchases made for minority-owned businesses. So I think this is great. We need to move our manufacturing back from China. We're going to have to incentivize them to do that because you know what's going to happen? The Chinese are going to confiscate all their equipment. They're not just going to be able to come back. So if they're going to come back, they're going to take a hit. Well, it's in our best interest to help them out. And tax credits and things like that are going to be a big plus. But also look what he's saying, that they're going to try to give them incentives to put these things in the areas where there's the most unemployment, right? So it's not, Trump is so smart. He's so business smart. And yet no one's talking to you about that story. Did you see that story anywhere? It's a big story. This could be one of the big parts of our coming back because, as I told you, the left is trying to drive our businesses out of business by keeping the stupid rules on restaurants and then grocery stores and all this stuff, scaring people by lying to them. The left is trying to suppress business. And so the problem was that they were going to put a lot of businesses that could have been saved out of business. And that's what you and I are trying to stop. But if they do put some of these businesses out of businesses, and it could be up to 30 or 40%, well then, how do you start new businesses? Well, if you bring manufacturing back from overseas, that's a great way to do it. And we hope they will do that. So that was good news, and I want to share that with you. We also had some good news with the Michael Flynn case. As you know, we've been big supporters of General Flynn. We've donated money to his legal cause. I've been in touch with him over the years. He wrote me a nice email when I wrote him a letter saying how happy we were that they were going to drop his case. And then, as I said, this Judge Sullivan, he's an Obama appointee who's a leftist. And again, all these people who say, no justice, no peace. We're with you. We're with you. AG Barr, you've got to prosecute and get John Durham to prosecute McCabe and Comey and Strzok and Page and all the rest of these guys, Pre-Step, and everyone was involved in the coup. And I hope that's coming. But when you have a judge, a federal judge, who's got a Supreme Court ruling from just 2 weeks ago and another appellate court ruling in his district saying that if the government drops the case against you, it's over. You can't do any more. And yet this Judge Sullivan made a fool of himself in court this week, trying to say he's still going to prosecute Michael Flynn because Michael Flynn pled guilty to things, when in fact he did not. Judge Sullivan, said that Flynn pleaded guilty to this. Flynn did not plead guilty to the crime of false statements for his work with Turkey, and Flynn's statement of the offense didn't state all the elements of that offense, as even his attorney admitted. So this judge is trying to say that Flynn still needs to be prosecuted and sent to prison because under his testimony he admitted the crimes, but he didn't. And so this judge is blinded by his ideology. He needs to be disbarred. He needs to be impeached. And I think the appellate court is going to have none of this, And I think that they're going to tell Judge Sullivan, the case is closed, you're done. Hopefully that's going to happen this week. We'll pray for that, and I ask you to pray for that, because Judge Flynn has been through holy hell. And by the way, I saw a little tweet from Donald Trump this week that said, Roger Stone, you can sleep comfortable in your bed. That's all he said. So whether he's going to get a commuted sentence or he's going to be pardoned, it looks like Trump has sent a message to Roger Stone. You will not go to prison for being a supporter of mine. And I think that's awesome. And we hope that that's coming down the road too. Last story for this week. That's an important story. It's about Obamagate. Rod Rosenstein, the deputy, the acting attorney general, testified in the Senate in front of Lindsey Graham's committee, and he was grilled about all the stuff going on with Obamagate. And what he did is he basically threw the FBI under the truck. He blamed McCabe. He basically said that McCabe did not tell him things he should have told him. And if he would have known the things that McCabe knew if McCabe would have told him, he wouldn't have signed the third FISA agreement. He said he didn't really read it. It was kind of a dog ate my homework type of thing. But what it did do is it showed that there really was a coup attempt. Rosenstein's testimony made it clear that there was no basis for going after Trump whatsoever, and that the FBI under Comey made it all up, and that it was wrong. And so now there's going to be a lot more testimony, and there's going to be a lot more information coming out. And I do believe that these people are going to get prosecuted. How many or how high up, I don't know. But if we can get those people prosecuted and get AG Barr to go after the funders for the left as co-conspirators in a RICO investigation, ladies and gentlemen, you will see an America that you just dream about. You will see an America where people are worried about their own prosperity and staying out of other people's business and encouraging each other. You won't see this division between us. You won't see this horrible situation between our political parties, because the Democratic Party doesn't exist. It's the Communist Party USA. And I was talking to a friend the other day, and I said, do you understand that all these Democratic mayors and governors and city council members who are enjoying these riots, who are encouraging these riots, who are saying stand back and let them burn down the buildings? Do you understand that if we go after the lefties, the wealthy people who fund the left, and hold them accountable, that none of them will be able to win re-election? Do you understand that Republicans could then compete in elections in these cities? That's something to think about. That's something good for you to think about. It's something I'm dreaming about. And I'm calling AG Barr, and I'm messaging the White House, and I'm pushing them, because we can do it. This is horrible what we've just been through. But as it always happens in war, when things look the blackest and the bleakest, and I learned this from Winston Churchill, that there's also opportunity. And so the fact the left stepped out so brazenly, so just showed themselves, weren't even hiding what they were doing, has given us the opportunity to just destroy them, just put them out of business. And I hope we're going to do that. So we're going to wrap up the show. I thank you for listening. As you know, this show is your show, so you need to tell other people about it. The stories in this show, some of them came from you, the listeners. Send me comments at info@wethepeopleconvention.org, info@wethepeopleconvention.org. Send me your notes. Tell me what you think I should cover. Tell me if I made a mistake or if I messed up. But most of all, never lose hope. Never stop fighting for your country and for your own personal freedom and liberty and prosperity. Because that's the gift our founders gave us that we must defend with every breath we take for our entire lives. I sure appreciate you joining us this week. You've been listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion radio show and podcast, and I'm Tom Zawistowski.